Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another podcast. This is a very special one because it's been 8 months since Jamie and I have been able to record outside of Zoom, and we are here at the NOV Towers in Houston, Texas. And we are extremely excited to be part of this episode with the one and only Michael Gaines, the voice of NOV.
Yes. So, Michael, we've been so excited for this day, and I'm so happy you allowed us to come to the towers to do this.
Yeah.
And to be in person. I just love it. And, one thing I'm sure a lot of people are asking is to have a title as the voice. I mean, what do you really do? What is your job?
You just need a voice. That's all. And then you can have a title too. And it doesn't come with a big red chair either.
No.
So unfortunately, I don't spin around and say you can sing, because if that were the case, I'd be out. So actually the title came several years ago when I started, had the opportunity to start with NOV in the capacity of helping with the podcast. And so we came, actually David Reed, our chief technology officer and chief marketing officer, came up with the idea, and then worked with some others, and we tried to get it together. And so he's like, okay, well, you're going to be, doing this podcast. And really it started internally because we just wanted to test it really quick and see, would it work? Would it not? It's like, well, you're going to do this podcast and you kind of need a title to go with it. So be thinking about that. And my old manager, she told me, she said, hey, think about that. And it's like, okay. And it's like, oh, hey, here's one, The Voice. Isn't that funny? And then I thought some other titles and went on ahead. And sure enough, like I got a notification in my inbox and it was like, your title's been updated. I was like, oh, I don't remember putting in an update. What is it? It's The Voice. It's like, oh, okay, well, I guess that's my title. So
That's a pretty cool title.
It's a good party opener, that's for sure. So it's just like if I can't get the crowd to laugh or smile, or I was like, well, my title's a voice. Like, oh, really? Oh, okay, there we go.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So outside of the podcast, what else do you do for NOV?
Well, I have the opportunity to work with some really, really great folks. I know that it's almost like when you talk about your newborn kid, I have the cutest one ever. Well, I think I have the best team ever, and I think that's a fact. So if you like to dispute that, talk to me afterwards. But I get to work with several folks. So we have a really talented young lady that works with us, Shelby, and she runs our social media program, and she is phenomenal. So it's just I just ask her a question. She's like, oh, well, I've done all this research. Let me show you. It's like, bloop. It's like, wow,
amazing.
like, how do you do that? So social media, I have a couple other folks, Jason and Amanda. They're on our content team, so they help with writing technical papers and articles and things on our intranet and a lot of those things, which is just really, really, really great. They both are just super talented, and I'm just honored to work with them. It's kind of like I try to clear a path for them. It's like, what else do you need? Like, do you need a cup of lemonade? Like, whatever you want. Like, I'll get it for you. I just want to support them because they are just always cranking out great work. So content, social media, and then of course the podcast. But also we have 2 LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube live shows that we do weekly. So one is NOV Live, and so I get to work with that, and that's where we just take a deep dive with technical experts and subject matter experts and talk, like, kind of geek out on technology. So, what is it? What does it do? How does it work? Tell me about critical dimensions, flow rates, diameter. I mean, you name it. And we broadcast that live every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central time. And then at 1:30, we kind of almost take the opposite side and we dive into things around like markets, right? So what's going on in the markets? Tell me about, that M&A that I just heard about earlier this week. What does that mean? How does that work? Help me understand what is valuation of a company. I mean, unfortunately, we have to learn some other financial terms like bankruptcy. Like, what does that really mean? Does that mean a company? So just really understanding those terms for, and I'm raising my hand, the average Joe that's just kind of like, okay, like I've heard these things. We're trying to help. One of the taglines, Asad Mahana, he's the director of business strategy at NOV. And so we he said, I really want people to know that we're bringing the insight out. So he's like the equivalent of a consulting firm inside our company, but he provides that insight for all of our businesses. And he's like, well, I want to share some of those insights as well. So we try to share some of those perspectives that we have here at NOV with the rest of the world. So I help him with that. And then as as is always the case on a job description at the very end, duties as assigned. So so I help with, webinar, or I'll help with,
Whatever's
wrapping up
thrown at
cables,
you.
whatever is needed. So I like the variety. So it's fun.
That's amazing. That's something that we definitely want to talk about after towards the end of the episode is the marketing that you guys do on LinkedIn, on social media is just like no one else does what you guys do. And it's really interesting because it's free online, like obviously you have to pay the people to do it, but it's free marketing, it's free views, and not enough people are tackling it, which for you guys is probably like, please don't change, let us still run the world.
The social media doesn't exist. No one worry about it.
Yeah, social
don't
media
worry about
sucks. Don't do it. But yeah, it's definitely something that we're very interested in talking about because you guys do an excellent job.
Yeah.
But
what I think is really cool about you, though, is your story. I mean, you did not come from oil and gas. Your background's very different. I think it's very inspiring, and we really want to get into that. So we'd really like to start on just like kind of how you got started. What was life like growing with you growing up, and kind of get into how you even got into oil and gas. So let's just start just like with what was life when you were younger.
Yeah, that's right. And then the harps play, and then everything is blurry, and we go to Little Michael, right?
Yeah,
so,
exactly, Little Michael.
So, well, I was born and raised in Dallas, and now being in Houston, I just love that as an opener because it's just kind of like, I love debates, so I just say, I'm from Dallas, go, and then I just wait for the lobs. So it's like Mavericks fan, Cowboys fan, just on and on. So here come the verbal darts. That's okay. So grew up in Dallas. Actually, my parents moved down to Texas from Virginia in the 80s. So they are we're here, buddy. I'm oldest of three. I have a brother that's 3.5 years younger than me, and he lives in Austin. And I have a sister that's 6 years younger than me, and she lives in the Fort Worth area.
Okay.
So, so three of us. So grew up there. Really loved it. And then went to school out in East Texas. And the reason I chose out there, actually, Laterno University is where I went to school in Longview. And the reason I chose that is because my dad spent the better part of more than 2 decades, almost 3 decades, as a U.S. Navy reservist. So I grew up, with him doing his a weekend a month and 2 weeks every year, doing his training with the Navy. And so it was really normal to go, and there's a joint reserve base in Fort Worth where there's like Army, Air Force, Navy, kind of joint branches come together, and they all kind of use that as a common base. And so it was common also every other year for the Blue Angels to come in. And so I remember as a kid, like seeing those things like fly around. It's like, ooh, that, like, how do I do that? And so I've always had a fascination with aviation. I could just talk about it all day long. And so when I, graduated high school, I said, hey, I want to go and be a part of the Air Force Academy. So I, got my medical certificate. I actually was able to get a recommendation and on all those pieces. And then they said, well, everything works out except that you don't have perfect, uncorrected 20/20 vision. It's like once you get in, like, then you can work from there. But going in for what I wanted to do, to be a fighter pilot, you had to have the uncorrected 20/20. So I was like, well, okay, well, maybe I can do commercial. And so I was able to get a waiver and went to school. And so I started doing ground school and really liked it. But it's kind of one of those things where you learn, sometimes you can really like something, but it's just not for you specifically, right? And so that was a challenge. I mean, it took a little bit of time for me to finally come to terms with, okay, this isn't for me, but all my friends still do it, and that was okay. I learned over the years to really celebrate that, to be okay with the fact that even though it's something I thought I really wanted to do, that it was okay, and that there was a different plan for where I was going to go. So what ended up happening is actually changed my major to marketing. And the reason I was very intentional about why I chose marketing. While I admire, those that are, graphic designers and illustrators and animators, for me, marketing was more on the kind of the strategy side. So the marketing side, not necessarily marketing communications, but marketing strategy, because I love psychology, but I really like business. And it was like, how do you shape it and really, and I like strategies. Like, how do you, what major allows you to kind of do that? And for me, that was marketing, really understanding, not so much, what graphic do you want on your print flyer? That's important. But it was like, who are you talking to? Where are you going? How are you going to get it there? What are your customers
How are you
really
get them
want?
to
Yeah,
engage
exactly.
and buy
Exactly. Like kind of like the groundwork that allows for all of the other elements to take place, or at least that's how I view it. So, so I switched to marketing, and I just fully like went in feet first. I just said, all right, I'm just going to go all in, and really enjoyed it. I mean, we had a marketing club on campus, and I was like, how do I get involved? And end up being a part of that. And then I was the marketing club president, and part of the American Marketing Association, and went to
So you really found your niche.
Yeah, I was just like, oh man, I really really like it. And so I started doing that, and so that was kind of through college. Ended up being student body president, and still doing marketing, and really trying to find ways to leverage what I was learning right on the university campus. So that was really fun.
So tell us about. We heard that you got your first job, and it wasn't at all what you thought.
Yes.
Like you're talking about marketing, you're so passionate about it. Like, you're like, I'm gonna kill it when I graduate. And then you were like cold calling and doing like the typical crappy sales role.
Man. It was it was tough. So I graduated in 2008. At the time my wife and I were dating. She graduated a year before me and was recruited by one of the big 4 accounting firms, and so she had moved down to Houston, and of course, being from Dallas, is like, well, why would you do that? Like, you're not supposed to go to Houston. Like, it's only supposed to stay in Dallas. But anyway, we were dating. We got engaged, and I ended up moving down with a friend that worked for one of the operators, one of the major operators, and so I stayed with them in Kingwood, and in the northern part of Houston. So it's like, okay, I graduated. I have my paper right here. So it's like, all right, world, like, look, I'm a college graduate. So, one at a time, please offer me a job. And I started looking, and it kept hearing people talk about, economy. I was like, yeah, the economy, it's a thing, but hey, hire me.
Yeah.
And so what I found very quickly was that jobs were very, very hard to come by. But I was able to find one where it was an outside sales job. And we were reselling shipping services. So, you have like your major, overnight carriers, like your FedEx or UPS or your DHL, those kind of things. So we were reselling some of those services. And I, as extroverted as I am, like, I was so apprehensive to knock on a door. Because like, oh man, like, I'm bothering somebody, and I'm interrupting their day, and they're trying to be productive, and it was such a struggle. But I did that for a little bit, and I was glad to have that job. But that was July of 2008. So July, August, September, October 4th, my wife and I got married, went on our honeymoon in the mountains in Colorado, came back. They're like, hey, Michael, like, so excited for you, like, new husband, you're new to the city, I know you're growing your network, but we're gonna have to let you go. So I was like, oh, okay. So new city, like, I don't know anybody.
Just got married.
Yeah.
And just graduated, and I don't have a job, and I don't know even how to do this. So it was really interesting. So, my wife was just amazingly encouraging and supportive, and just poured a lot of encouragement into me. I mean, we did a lot of conversations and a lot of praying, and through that, I was able to find some other work, but it was a lot of starts and stops. I mean, it was the morbid going joke between us was that I wouldn't be able to hold a job for more than 30 days. So it's like, I go here, and they're like, hey, like, you're great, but like, economy, right?
Yeah.
Here, economy.
You bring that up, and I feel like a lot of people are probably struggling with that right now.
Yeah.
Especially in the scenario that we're in with COVID, and just, there's a lot of uncertainty in the market. How were you able to stay positive and keep going? Because ultimately, and we'll get to it, ultimately you found the right job, right? But how did you work through that? And I know you mentioned you spoke to your wife, but like, what did those conversations look like in your mind? How did you stay positive?
Yeah. So candidly, it was a couple things. One, it really boiled down to so my, like I mentioned, my personal faith. Like, we really did a lot of praying together, and a lot of just talking and communicating together, and thinking through those things, because that was a really big source for us. But between us, Rachel and I, she had encouraged me really to volunteer. Actually, our church had a new ministry specifically for people who had lost their job because of the economy. And so what I started doing was like helping people, organizing like resume workshops. And like, I mean, I didn't know a lot, but I knew enough to be able to assist a little bit. And so I was volunteering with those folks and meeting with them and helping organize those things. And really what I found was, I mean, of course, during this whole time, I'm still looking for work for sure, and trying to go, interview when I can and things. But I found that by having something that allowed me to pour into someone else, it kind of got me out of a like, oh man, like not
everything
woe is
sucks
me.
For me.
But speaking from my own experience, it got me out of, look how bad I have it. And it's like, well, one, there was always someone else that had it way worse than me. Someone that had like, here I am newly married with no kids. And here's a guy that had like 2 or 3 kids and he's mid-career and he's trying to find, I'm like, oh, okay. Not that it's like, well, too bad, but I really dove in, and that really helped not only change my perspective, but give me an appreciation for the value in helping others around me. And so that was a big part, really, really doing that. And of course, understanding and trying to learn like what networking really meant. Like I didn't really know. I thought it was just someone kind of schmoozing around and just, hey, what do you going to give for me? But again, what I found was that when I started talking to other folks,
there was always someone willing to help. Like,
exactly.
I know this person.
Yeah, people in businesses saying like, I have this business and I'm trying to figure out how to do it. And it's like, oh, well, I mean, I've done some collegiate like marketing strategy. Like, tell me what you're trying to do. Well, we're trying to position our business this way. It's like, oh, well, maybe you should. And so like being able to help them that way. And then I'm technically inclined, so helping people with, computers or with graphics or anything I could do to help them.
Yeah. Before you know it, these people are promoting. And they're like, oh, if you know Michael can do this. And then, maybe a job opportunity comes from that or
so
something.
it was really great. And or even more so as you go to those things, you're like, oh, I was over here having this conversation. Actually, I just talked to a guy that's looking for someone just like you. Yeah. Why don't I connect you? And yeah, sure, there's definitely something in it for you. But I think the idea of really being able to genuinely want to help someone else because you can, I think that's a really powerful thing that really, it's almost like a universal type thing. Like almost anybody can do that. And the benefits, even if, I'm a big believer, even if nothing came back to me, it's not I'm going to do this only if, it's I'm going to do this because I want the best for you type thing. So anyway, so those were kind of two things that really helped me personally.
Yeah. So tell us, there was obviously no oil and gas background. Your parents didn't come from oil. Your wife didn't either. How did you get into NOV? And tell us a little bit about how you transitioned from not knowing anything about oil and gas into, here's your job offer.
Yeah, sure. So, as I mentioned, one of the opportunities I did have in college was student government. And so after I had been out of college for a little bit, I had come back from one of these networking meetings. There was like a luncheon that actually still goes on here in Houston, and there's a group that does them. So I had come back to our little apartment, and my wife was at work, and it was just me, and I was just like, oh man, like what am I gonna do? And again, I was just kind of praying and just kind of walking around the apartment, and I was just like, all right, well, I'm just gonna continue to try to put my resume out there and see what I can get. And it just so happened I got a call that afternoon, and this lady said, hi, so-and-so, I don't know if you remember me. And I was just like, oh, no, I don't. And of course, this is early Facebook days, but I was like, okay, let me see. Oh, yeah. So I saw her face, and then I remember, she's like, I don't know if you remember me, but I work for a company called National Oilwell Varco, and they are looking for a product line champion in Conroe, Texas. And so, the only downsides are I see where your address is, it's in Conroe and it requires travel. And she's like, I don't know if that interests you. And I said, let me think. No problem.
Yeah.
And she said, okay, well, if you're interested, come interview. So I went up and so I said, well, what's the role beforehand? And she said, well, it's for a roller cone product line champion. So I was like, okay, roller cone product line champion. Sounds great. So I was like, okay, roller cones. So that's a drill bit. So I'm Googling drill bits and I'm looking at, I'm like, so Home Depot drill bits? Like, is that what they?
You had no idea.
I had never seen one in my life. So I'm furiously typing. I was like, I don't
that
think
is
this
so
is it.
Funny.
Oh, this. So I'm like on Wikipedia and all this stuff, printing out all these things. So go up for the interview shortly thereafter, and I remember interviewing with one of the lead engineering managers, and it was a really, really great guy. And so he said, yeah, so tell me about what you know about drill bits. And I was just like wide eyed. I was like, well, I just learned about him last night, and this is what I know.
I heard you can get them at Home Depot.
Yeah, I was like, I don't really know, and so, but it was fine. We just had a really great conversation, and he kind of told me more about the industry and where NOV was and how they played in. And so then I went and interviewed with what would end up being my boss, and he was he was an expat previously, but just come back from Australia, and so we had a conversation, and things tended to go well. I ended up having to give a presentation. They let me choose the topic, and I chose a topic on how to be a good team player. Mm-hmm. So I did that interview, and then interviewed with several others, and yeah. So then they ended up hiring me, and so I specifically inquired. I said, "Well, why did you hire me? Like I'm not an ME, double E, not a petroleum engineer."
Yeah, you didn't know.
Yeah, and they said, well, we intentionally wanted to bring in somebody that didn't have previous oil and gas experience, to have completely fresh eyes on our industry. They said we wanted somebody that was strategic, and we wanted somebody that had enough understanding of business, but like knowing the industry was almost like we don't want them to know. Like,
yeah, didn't have any of these
preconceived notions of anything. So I was like, okay,
that's really cool.
And so so to your point, so when I dove in, I was like, okay, I love new things and I love diving in. So I did. I started going to these meetings, and there was I'm not able to convey how much of an imposter syndrome there was. Right, the idea of like I am such a fraud. Uh-huh. And it is just a matter of time before that guy over there walks over and says, Michael, I know you don't know what you're doing. I was like, I just knew it was going to come, and I remember going to these engineering interviews. And so people are talking about CFD analysis and talking about, fluid bypass on and everybody's like, oh yeah. Oh yeah, look at that back rake angle. And I'm like, oh yeah, back rake. Yeah. And I'm furiously like writing all these terms down. Because after every meeting I go to my boss, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? Mm-hmm. And I just remember, I mean, it had gotten to a point many months in. I mean, I kept going to my boss and said, hey, I probably shouldn't be doing this, but I am so grateful for this job, but I really don't know what they're saying in there. He's like, oh, it's no problem. Like you'll pick it up. I was like, no. You're not listening. Like I do not understand.
Yeah.
It's like, no problem. He's like, you've got it within you. You'll get it. And so finally, I just remember being at this meeting. It was, you have the scene of the movies, kind of like the guy way, way, way on the other side of a table, pass the salt, these long engineering tables. And I remember being way near the end, and they were on the phone with somebody somewhere in the world. They were talking about, oh yeah, we just got this drill bit and da 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 da, and they were talking about some phrases. And I was like, all right. So I just said, hey guys, like I know, like long distance call, right? Call and collect, whatever. I just got to ask, like, I just heard, he just said this one phrase. Could you just tell me, like, what is that? And of course, in my mind, I'm like, all right. And cue laughter.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so folks were like, oh, yeah. And so they just explained it. And then we come on. I was like, oh, okay. So after that meeting, one of the senior engineers, he had sent me a note. And he said, hey, Michael. He's like, thank you for asking that question in the meeting. He's like, I have been wanting to know for a long time.
No
way. But I just didn't want to ask because like I should have known beforehand. So thanks for asking. And I was like, oh. And that was like, whoop, that was the flip for me. So I said, okay, if the price of learning is egg on my face or laughter or that guy is just as green as can be, then call me green, no problem. But I will benefit because I will be learning and I will eventually be able to use this in the future. And so that was the beginning of me kind of being really okay with going to meetings and, hey, just so you know, you need to book in another 15 minutes because I'm just going to ask questions this whole time.
As the product line manager at that time, what was your overall, like because since you were still somewhat trying to understand the product at the same time when you were managing the product. What were you mainly doing? Like just managing the people then at that point? Or since you had such good skills in the marketing and like the camaraderie teamwork, you were kind of helping bring all that together?
Yeah. So, I mean, in the early part, of course, a lot of it was relationship building. And that is one of the aspects of oil and gas, really the whole energy industry that I really love is just the relationships. I mean, now I was in a meeting today and there was a guy giving a presentation. I was like, oh, yeah, I met him on a trip that I made to Europe a while back, and I emailed him, and I'm thinking, wow, here's a guy that's like thousands of miles away that I built this relationship with. So really, it was partly relationship building, and then of course supporting the product line director at the time with some of the business forecasting and implementation. And so being the product line group, we're basically an incubated business owner, right? Within that. So you wake up today, you're import export compliance. On Tuesday you'll be finance. On Wednesday you'll be field engineering. On Thursday you'll be financial budgeting and forecasting for the next year. Okay. And so I loved that variety. And so it was learning how to be a really good generalist. Like I didn't
good at everything. Yeah, like not perfect at anything.
Good enough to have a conversation and to know how to like what's going on and to be able to manage those things. But I don't need to be finance because we have a finance department. I don't need to be an engineer because we have engineers. But I need to at least understand what's going on to be able to support and help guide the business, right? And so so it was really learning those things. A lot of learning. My wife tells me I have goldfish memory, but my wife tells me that I told her constantly like, oh, I'll never understand this. I'll never understand. And she's like, Michael, like just give yourself time. Yeah. I wanted 5 years to be one day, and that was really hard for me because I have this crazy town drive to be 120 miles an hour all the time, and just to be running all cylinders, and to know that there are just some things in life that just take time. And in our fiber optic world, like it's like, oh, well, if time is more than 1 nanosecond, I ain't got time for that. And it's like, no, like there are some things like that's okay.
Yeah, no, and I think we could all at some point relate because we all start in the industry somehow. And like Jamie, you probably didn't know anything about what you were selling.
I started with drill bits. Same way.
Probably didn't know anything about it.
Dull grading. I'm like 2, 1, 1. What is this?
Yeah, I was they're like bit hydraulics. And I was like hydraulics on your car.
Up and down.
What
like,
are
how
you
does that
talking
work?
about? Yeah. And it was fluid dynamics, and I was like,
man.
oh my gosh. So I can totally relate to that. But one thing that I really want to point out is when we first talked, you also talked about the progression within NOV, and you made some comments about how you constantly went back to one of your managers or somebody about a position that you wanted. And I think that was like really inspiring. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I was at the time, as is the case, the only constant in this industry, let alone life, is change. And so, there were multiple changes organizationally within the teams. And so I went from a product line champion, then I moved over into more of a technical support role. So it was almost closer to almost like a commercialization support person, right? Support manager. And then eventually transitioned back into in the product line group again. But at the time, the product line was kind of split, and so I was only managing like kind of one hemisphere, and the other part of it was in another business unit. And so it was kind of a little convoluted, and so it was one of those weird things where customers see it as, okay, well, here's a product, here's a company, that's it. But similar to like a cable company, or like a integrated cable company, they might have cable and telephone, and they're all different departments, and that's almost kind of like how this product line was. It's like, well, like this one goes with this business unit, and this one goes the other. And I saw that, I could see it, and I could see some of the pains internally where someone calls and says, hey, I need this tool. It's like, oh, well,
that's not me.
Sorry, you're on the other side of the pond. It's this other guy. Let me reroute. And I was like, man, like I could see it. So I kept saying, hey guys, can I be the global product line manager for this? Like I really see it. And it's like, well, let's just kind of continue to do what you're doing. And I know the intent was genuine. But it was one of those, the margin between like where I knew that I could perform and maybe where they thought I was, it had closed quite a bit over the years. I'd learned a lot. I'd been in the field. I committed myself to, really trying to learn these things. And so kind of kept going back and saying, hey, I really think I can do this. And so it would just kind of, fade off. And And then maybe another 6-8 months came by and say, hey, annual review, really looking for additional responsibility. And so we continue to have, and I continue to go back, and it wasn't, I wasn't really professional about it. I wasn't trying to be annoying or anything, but it was a constant like, okay, well, if I'm not able to do it, or they weren't able to give it to me, then I looked for opportunities to take on more responsibility. So I was like, okay, well, you know what? I see that this person has a problem. And I think one of the best things I can do is say, hey, how can I fix or take that problem off your shoulders? Oh, who doesn't want someone to come up and say, yeah, take these? So I started doing those things as a way to say like, hey, I'm able to take these.
More.
Yeah, I can take these things on. And so finally, after a little while, they said, okay, we'll go ahead and do it. And there were some internal organizational shifts, but I was able to be the global product line manager, and it was great because I heard some feedback internally saying, oh, finally, these problems that we've seen,
put it all together,
they can cover that, and that was really where I felt like I was able to get into a really strong stride and really just have a true global kind of ownership of that. And it ended up being, I still think, I love what I do now. If I weren't doing this, I think product line is, for me personally, like one of the most enjoyable places. And actually, when I left product line, I had numerous folks come up to me and it's like, oh man, you're going to marketing. It's like, oh yeah. Like, man, that's going to be really hard as an engineer going from engineering to marketing. I was like, well, I don't know who you're talking to, but I'm just a marketing guy that just so happened to be here. They're like, no, but really, I was like, no, like here's my diploma, like and I had actually
that just shows that a lot of times like you don't need to be in that role just because of your paper. It's just like once school's done, it's really up to like what you do within the work.
You have to, you have to jump, and I think it does. While you certainly have to deliver for sure, I think for me it's a constant reminder that when it's appropriate, take a chance on folks. Like if you can tell that someone really has that grit, that has that can do, that they'll just jump in. If you say, hey, here's a project, like the idea for me, the ideal scenario is I come back and they're like, hey, I knew nothing about this. I made 6 phone calls. I went down the hall to this lady. I talked to this guy. I had to read this book, but here it is, right? It might be a little sloppy and glue's falling off the page, but here it is. And to me, so that's kind of the mentality I took. It's like, I don't know how this works, but I'll take a course. I'll go out in the field. Ended up riding along with some of the guys up in Fort Worth and some of the drill bits and saying, hey, I've never done this. Let's go on a rig. Help me understand that.
And that is so helpful.
And so if you're willing to jump in and just say
down and dirty,
then I think that's a really big plus.
Wow. Well, you've had a very awesome career. Especially what I love is that it wasn't all, rainbows and butterflies. Like most people think sometimes looking up, like the voice at NOV, of course that guy, like he went to marketing and here he is. And it's like, when you dig down into people's stories, you all realize through even all our podcasts, everyone goes through challenges and that's what's really cool about it. But on the topic of NOV, one thing that we're insanely interested in is, what's the secret, I guess?
Like, was this the part where we edited it all out? Because
the marketing secret behind what you'll have captured.
Just like I feel like it's for me, like looking from the outside, it's obviously the people, like the culture, the team. You guys have like a different flavor, and you I don't know, you look at things a little bit differently. You're always kind of like the first ones out, but tell us a little bit about like social media back in the day, not even now, but when you guys started, when it was still kind of like looked down upon, and you guys probably looked like you were crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can tell you the secret. The secret, in large part, is a mixture of David Reed and allowing us to do crazy things, and him being amazingly comfortable with failing. Like he's just like, oh, let's try this. Like, oh, David, like we just tried this thing and it was a flop. And he's like, all right, well, what do you have for lunch? And he's like, well, but I failed. Like, isn't that and he really, I mean, it's not a lot of talk. It's a lot of walk. Like he really allows us to try new things. So
experiment. So you know what works and what doesn't.
And so he has been a real big champion. I mean, even when the social media first started, I mean, he was always an advocate for seeing those things and saying like, hey, like this is really going to be where things are going. And he has this knack of really being able to kind of call some of those things out. I mean, I'm certain he doesn't, provide foreshadowing for lotto pick numbers, but in terms of like business and strategy and specifically ways of engaging with customers and things like, I mean, he's really, really good at that. And so there's really, that's a big aspect, but also giving us the
freedom,
the license to try that. And he really supports us in that, even when, as you think of an adoption curve, right? Mm-hmm. So in the very early stage, you have to have early adopters. And I feel like he's definitely in that space. And so because he is, and because he is a champion for these things, we have someone that we can kind of incubate ourselves within and
well,
test.
And somebody at that level too that supports you. You really need that within the company, because when you do start experimenting and there is maybe a flop, you have somebody up top that's like, no, like it's fine. We're just going to pivot and do something else. When you don't have that person, then you could see maybe a whole marketing team go away because nobody's supporting it. And so that's really amazing that y'all have that. You have him there.
And he's, and I'm sure, if you talk to him, he would say the same thing, that it hasn't been just this, steamrolled smooth road.
I'm sure he's gotten a lot of backlash.
There's a lot
being at the top. Like, how did you let this go out?
But I think through those that fail quickly, but also when you find something that works, exponentially increase it, and it's like a flywheel effect. And success begets success to a certain degree. And so, but it's always it's that healthy hunger, right? Being okay with what you have, but also saying, okay, but just what's that extra 15-20%? What about that thing over there? I kind of, is that something we can do, or a concept? One of the big things that David always pushed us to internalize is that our yardstick isn't within our own organization. It's not the guy next door. I mean, in his mind, it's like, okay, so what's the largest movie studio in the world? Yeah, that's the one that we're working against, right? Or that's our competition to a certain degree. It wasn't even an industry. I mean, he's just the world, right?
Hollywood.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, really, truly.
Well, but
it shows.
No, totally. Because if you look at, if you were just to stay within the industry and say, well, we're doing the best within the industry, then it's like, well, but then what are you really comparing yourself against? If you look at Apple, or if you look at what these tech companies are doing, like we go to their websites and we're like, did you see that website?
Their marketing is just so well done.
But and if you compare yourself to that level, you've got nothing but to be, be better at what you're doing. So that's a really good perspective.
So the flip side of it though is that we're always shooting for, like, how does it look Hollywood style, and usually when people like really drill down, there's like, oh, well, you're this big NOV, you probably have like $80 billion worth of marketing budget, and usually it's just, okay, we've made a incredibly modest investment a long time ago, and we're just still using the same stuff. And it really is, like you said earlier, like our people. Like we have people that are, I mean, I just love to walk by their desks or whenever people are at their desk.
We're here.
But I love, and just to talk to them, and I'm just like, wow, like how do you do that? I mean, that looks so photorealistic, these animations. We have a guy that is on our team, and I am not even kidding. Like I'm like, what did you work on at home? Oh, well, I did this video overlay of me, like kind of 3D animation of like raising rocks and a photorealistic rock. Like he's got like Jedi powers, and he's like, oh, I was just trying out this new technique. I found this new song, and I was like, that's what you do for fun? So then he comes to work and he's like, oh, you want me to make you like a whole world with a rig drilling down laterally?
No problem.
Okay. And then it's just like, wind and wave, and I'm just like, whoa. But that's just like an example of like how the whole team is. People are really passionate. They really want to work with each other. Like, we have, I enjoy like a good debate. So sometimes there's conflict, but it's all because we're trying to reach like excellence. Right. And I think it's really key to understand the difference between perfection and excellence. Perfection's just trying to have it 100% all the time, no mistakes. Whereas excellence is, sure, there might be mistakes, but the path to get there is everyone working together, knowing what their superpower is, and then like just rocking and rolling in that space, right? So anyway.
You guys have done an excellent job. And I think what's really cool too is you guys have learned how to give value, free value to the public, which is really how you'll get followers, how you have people tuning in is not just like buy. I look at my tools all day long. It's like, hey, we're going to talk about the industry today.
Yeah.
And just like giving free value, like you said. And I think like even when you guys started the podcast, it was internally, but a lot of what you guys do is external, and you share more than any other company, you know? So I think that's pretty cool.
Well, you can give David Reed a call on the hotline.
Shout out to David Reed.
Well, we're getting near the end, and there's one question I really wanted to ask you, because I know you've done stuff on the sales side and stuff on the marketing side, and I think there's still a lot of confusion within our industry in like what is marketing and what is sales, because it is different. You need a marketing department, like specifically y'all have one, and it does show, like we just talked about how great your marketing is, right? You don't have salespeople creating your marketing. Could you maybe give us some like perspective on that?
Because they're different.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So I can give you kind of my perspective on it. I'm sure that there's a whole, world of differing perspectives. But for me, my experience has been, it's certainly a partnership for sure. And I think that, while you might have someone who's in a sales capacity, I really see that as really it may be a primary relationship, engager, someone who's really bringing the voice of the customer to us and saying, hey, I've been talking with it. I've been out there with the customer. I've been to their office. I've been really trying to intimately understand what it is that they need. And then they bring that to us. And so as a kind of internal partnership, we say, okay, from a sales standpoint,
this is what the market wants.
I hear what you're saying. So help me understand, does it need to be, this, what is it that you need? When they bring it to us, we kind of hear that through the lens, at least on the marketing communication side, from okay, so it sounds like you're trying to really help them understand or visualize this thing and
like,
why that's
what can
important.
we create to support you, and then post it maybe, or give you something for just in the client or something like that.
Yeah, and so that's the marketing comm side, and then on the strategy side, which they're all complement each other, but it's really trying to understand. Okay, so this is who you're talking to. This is what you need in order to do that. Help us understand. Exactly where they are, how do they consume information? Do they consume it just on a phone call? If that's the case, we can write a script for you. If it's, no, they love to touch a brochure. Okay, great. How do you need this laid out? Do we need to, have it in a specific language? Like, what do we need to do to support that conversation in order for the customer to know that you truly understand what they need? Not only from a relationship standpoint, but also from a supporting material standpoint, whether that's a social post, whether that's a webinar, whether that's a piece of collateral. And when you kind of have that constant conversation, because I'm a huge proponent of communication, right? Here I am. When you really start kind of getting everybody in the same mode of trying to understand, what is it that they need? How do we provide that? And what's the most, efficient and value add way to do that? Then I think that's when you start having folks, see like, okay, you get me, like you understand what I need, not necessarily, maybe a stereotypical view of like a marketing or sales is like, man, I can see you all are working together to really drive that value. And so that's kind of the shared success that we ultimately get to see. And it's a process, right? I mean, we're not batting 1,000, but when we do have that, when we do have wins, we get emails all the time. Hey guys, just got this from the sales team. Like, this is great. Like, this is a huge win. Oh, okay,
that's
great.
Cool.
So
we're
awesome. Making,
you're aligned.
And it's shared success. It really is. It's not, oh yeah, well, I landed this account, or, oh no, it's because I made this one color change on this graphic. It's hey, we all, effort. We really did. And it sounds, some people say, oh, that sounds kind of hokey, but it's like, I'm just letting you know, like, that's what we live day in and day out here. And it really works for us. So.
That's awesome. Well, it's really great to hear how supportive y'all are of each other. And I think it really shows. And like we said before,
we've met so many NOE people.
Yeah. So, and to your point too, when you just said like having the support of David, some other people that we've talked to that are successful in marketing. That was the same thing. They have somebody at a higher level that's like, free for all. You just
take
try
risks.
And it shows, because you see their marketing and you're like, oh my gosh, like that's so cool. I wish
it's not cookie cutter.
No. This is Scratch Kitchen NOV. So we're just making it as we go.
I like it. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Trying to get your podcast for the
Yeah.
last few months. So it's
Yeah.
kind of nice that we reserved it for our first in-person one.
I know.
Yes.
I know. So
Thank
this
you
is
again
great.
so much.
Yeah, my
and
pleasure.
if anyone wants to find The Voice, where
Yes.
would they find you?
Oh man, well, I mean, I'd love to say I'm like the super duo here with Flipping the Barrel on every platform out there, but I'm usually on LinkedIn more often than not.
Okay.
I love reading articles and kind of hearing perspectives there. So it's usually my jam is LinkedIn, but if not, well. Yeah, it's pretty much LinkedIn.
It's okay, so
I was about to say that's where I'm at. And now that
Michael
they have LinkedIn stories, I can bring in my Insta wannabe into LinkedIn.
There we go. There we go.
And then The Voice too on Apple Podcasts.
Yeah,
right?
So NOV Today podcast. So yeah, we have that on Apple Podcast and Google Podcasts as well. So
Okay.
we're there as well.
And your lives. Don't
We
miss
are
out the
live, yeah. So every Wednesday at 11 a.m. and 1:30 p.m. Central Time. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Great. Well, go check them out. And then also leave a comment. We love to hear from y'all too. So thank you everybody in for listening. And thank you for coming on today, Michael.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank
you.